Hello, I'm Anna Kozlowski, and I'm going to be speaking with you about Civil Rights Compliance Overview. This is just a brief overview, and we have a more detailed training once a year for you. This slide shows the various topics that we're going to cover today. If you have any questions related to any of them, please make a note of it now as we're going along, and we can get questions answered for you later on. Civil rights are simply the non-political rights of a citizen that are guaranteed to us by the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution and a variety of acts of Congress and other regulations. There are 6 protected classes: race, color, national origin, disability, sex, and age. These 6 protected classes apply to all of our child nutrition programs. There are other protected classes, but they are not involved with the child nutrition programs. The next few slides are going to talk about the history of where all of this came from and why we have 6 protected classes. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the genesis of our civil rights laws. It addressed race, color, and national origin. The Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 is important for you to know about because it says that if you receive even $1 in federal funding, then your entity must comply with all civil rights legislation in all of its operations. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 is synonymous with sexual discrimination. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities or ADA Act of 1990 are synonymous with protections for people who have disabilities. And the Age Discrimination Act of 1975, of course, deals with age. We have other executive orders that influence what we do. Executive Order 13166 dealt with people who have limited English proficiency and how we have to work with those people. There are numerous implementing regulations that govern our work. Most of them are in 7 CFR, which is the USDA part of the Code of Federal Regulations. FNS Instruction 113-1, particularly Appendix B, deals with civil rights legislation. There are numerous USDA guidance and policy memoranda that have influenced what we do and given us more rules to follow, and we try to keep you updated on these as they come out. You're required to have a public notification system that lets applicants, participants, and potentially eligible people know about the availability of the program and what they need to do to sign up for it. It's important that you have this information available in alternative formats and languages as necessary. You have to notify people with disabilities about the availability of reasonable modifications and auxiliary aids and services. You have to notify people with limited English proficiency of their right to free language assistance services. And you always have to make sure that any photographic or pictorial information in brochures or commercials is showing diversity in all of your students, equal opportunity for everyone. A major part of the public notification system is what we call the NDS, or the non-discrimination statement. This wording comes to us directly from the USDA, and it talks about what the 6 protected classes are, how information is available in other languages or for people with disabilities. It informs people about how they can file a program discrimination complaint. And then the last line of it is this institution is an equal opportunity provider. That NDS has to go out on application forms, notification letters of eligibility or ineligibility, any notice of adverse action forms, complaint forms, the home page of the program web page, public information including program literature, Other documents may be able to use that short form. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. Not everything is required to have the NDS. If you send home a weekly menu that just has the food items for each day of the week, that doesn't need an NDS. But if you were to have something on there to remind parents that you needed them to do something for eligibility, then it would need the NDS. Another major part of the public notification system is posting the And Justice for All poster. The one that's currently being used is green. We're expecting some new ones to come out shortly, and we will get those distributed to all approved sponsors as quickly as we can. You should post the poster in as many languages as are needed. There's a link in the presentation on how to get to the USDA website where they have it in English, Spanish, and additional other languages. I'm going to talk a little bit about civil rights complaints. These don't happen very often, but they do come up from time to time, so you have to be prepared to handle them in accordance with regulations. First thing to know is that anyone can file a complaint. It can be a parent, a guardian, a child, someone representing them. It does have to be based on those 6 protected classes that we talked about at the beginning. Complaints may come to you in written form, they may come to you in verbal form, they may even be anonymous, and you would need to accept them. You have to have a complaint form and a log, or you can use the USDA complaint form, which is what we do at the state, and we have a log that's approved by them. You cannot require people to fill out any specific form. Complaints have to be submitted within 180 days of the alleged discrimination, although if you receive one later, go ahead and submit it, and then the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture can determine whether or not to proceed with that complaint. Any complaint that you receive based on civil rights has to be sent to the ALSDE. We record it and we send it on to the Civil Rights Division in Atlanta for further evaluation. They would tell us how to proceed or they would handle it on their own. This is the USDA complaint form and there is a link to it within the PowerPoint. It's also available in multiple languages. If you decide that you would prefer to have your own complaint form, it must have the same kind of information that's on the USDA complaint form, information about who's complaining and how to contact them, where something happened, what is it that they allege happened, what's the basis for the claim, one of those 6 protected classes, information about any witnesses, and of course the date on when it happened. You want to keep a civil rights complaint log that has the following headings on it, or you're welcome to email me and I will send you the Excel document that we use to record any complaints that we receive. You do need to have written civil rights complaint procedures, and if you could answer some of the following questions, that will give you the basis of having policies and procedures. We expect to have ours approved soon and we'll have them posted on the website and we will let people know so that they can use ours as a model for writing their own. Assurances address civil rights language, but these are in contracts. So in the permanent agreement between the state agency and an entity that's going on to one of our programs, they have assurance language. The templates that we have that you would use with a food service management company or if you're contracting with another school to provide meals has this assurance language in it. If you contract with anyone else, they must also have that language in it. Once a year, we're going to ask you to report ethnic and racial data. And this is done for statistical purposes so that we can analyze it on a state level after you've looked at it on a local level, just to see does it look like any gaps might be there. On the state level, For example, we did an analysis of 2022 data, and we noticed that a participation of Asians is lower than what the population would suggest. So we'll be looking at that and trying to find ways to see if there is a problem, and if there is, what we might be able to do to remediate it. You want to hang on to this data for at least 3 years plus the current year, and if there should be any kind of investigation or civil rights complaint, or if you had any kind of corrective action related to civil rights data, you'd need to hang on to all that data until it was completed, and then for another 3 years. Language assistance. You have to be able to have a system in place to provide help for people who do not speak English as a primary language. And these are people who would be challenged to read, speak, write, or understand English. This might be the parents or the guardians that you work with, even if their children speak English perfectly well in school. The parents might not. You have to make sure that you have a way to get help to them as quickly as possible and to have them be able to sign up for the program. Keep in mind it's not appropriate to use children as interpreters or translators, and it's not appropriate to ask people to bring their own interpreters. You also have to provide assistive technologies or interpretation for people with disabilities, and we have recently put things into place to help with this. If you have a need to help somebody with the program and their application, any special needs that they might have, please call our language line, which is our main CMP number. And all of our ASAs have been trained to reach out to our selected vendor and have you have instantaneous interpretation. We can also arrange for translation of documents if that is needed. This service is available free to you at this time. Um, just let us know how we can help as we're going along. We did a test run and it worked very well. And then we had one call come in so far. We just started this in December for assistance with Spanish, and we were very pleased with how quickly we were able to connect to a native Spanish speaker. It might take more than a few seconds for a different language. Let's talk about what you have to do to address the needs of people who have disabilities. Disabilities is very broadly defined as something that just limits at least one major life activity. And the focus for CMP should always be working with the parents or the guardians to make sure that the individual has the opportunity to participate in the program. It's not up to us to determine whether or not the person has a disability. Program operators have to make reasonable modifications in the meal service or in the meal itself to accommodate people at no extra charge. Now, this might be different for a daycare home, for example, that's asked to provide an extremely expensive formula that might not be reasonable. For the most part, though, things can be done to help people that at low cost or at no cost. Schools have more resources, of course, than a daycare home would have. It's important to keep in mind that any modification you make to a meal that fits meal pattern requirements does not need anything special in terms of documentation. However, if you have a request to serve a meal that does not meet meal pattern requirements, that's only reimbursable if it's supported by a written medical statement from a state licensed healthcare professional. In Alabama, that would be a physician, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant. And the person has to be authorized to write prescriptions. It's important that meals are always served in the most integrated setting appropriate to the needs of an individual with a disability. And we often get questions about people who have something like a peanut allergy. Can you separate them? Well, you might have to if it's an extremely severe allergy and you don't know what the other children are bringing. But you want to make sure that that child is not eating alone and that they're have an ability to sit with other people to the greatest extent possible. In addition, if your business employs more than 15 people, then you have to have a designated person to work with disability requirements. This can be as simple as having a Section 504 coordinator. Civil rights compliance reviews happen as you go through the application process and the yearly renewal process. Civil rights are also part of the routine administrative reviews, and it's also possible to have a visit just for civil rights. In general, the process is the same for these compliance reviews as they are for administrative reviews. The federal people can come and review us. We can review our sponsors, and our sponsors are required to review their subrecipients. Citizenship is never a consideration in any child nutrition program. Sometimes people might be afraid to complete forms because they're worried about that, but you can assure them we do not consider citizenship in determining whether anyone is eligible for any child nutrition program. Once a year, we do a full required civil rights training. This is usually done in July. Everyone has to participate in it who's a frontline worker. We do record it so that you can use it for training purposes with your staff. Our staff also have to be trained, and it's very important that you keep records of who attends the virtual webinar or watches the recording. You need to keep the agenda, the sign-in sheet, and copies of what we've sent, for example, the PowerPoint. All right, now questions can be added as we're going through this through the chat, or at any time you can reach out to us to ask questions related to civil rights. My email address is on the front of this the slideshow. So thank you for your time today, and I'll turn you over to the next one.